let's go with the current thing right now, superhero films.
Yeah.
What film do you think really spurred on superhero films becoming what they are now?
I don't think it was a specific film. I think it was I think superhero films always has been a thing. People always enjoyed it, but I think Marvel made it mainstream by just Kevin Feige just being smart as fuck and how to like market that whole IP.
Okay, so here's what my thought process is.
Yeah.
I think the film that did it, or the films that did it, were Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films.
Okay.
Of course, there were superhero films before that, like there's Superman in the 70s or 80s.
X-Men were big.
Well, they were kind of more mid-2000s, I feel like.
X-Men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Sam Raimi's first one came out, I think 2000, 2001.
Well, yeah, we'll check that. But yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and so those films were fucking massive.
Yeah.
There were superhero films before that would do pretty good money. But with those, they did fucking big as shit. Like, comparably compared to previous superhero films. And I think that proved more to the industry of like, okay, these films work. So then whenever is being reactive as the industry is, Warner Brothers go, okay, we've made Superman before. We made some Batman ones in the 90s. One was decent, one was shit. And it's like, okay, let's try to find a director who can try to do the same thing for us that Sam Raimi did with Spider-Man. And then we got Christopher Nolan, who then made Batman Begins, and then, of course, The Dark Knight, that came out, what year? 2007, 2008?
Yes, something like that.
And around that same time, Marvel, who didn't do Spider-Man because that was Sony, because they had the rights to it, I think Marvel felt more comfortable, like they were able to get more financing, because at this time they weren't owned by Disney.
Yeah.
It was Kevin Feige, and then I think Alan Horn, was the other dude in charge.
Yeah.
I think they were mostly working with Paramount for distribution, but they were handling a lot of financing themselves. It got easier for them to pitch their idea because Spider-Man trilogy did a bunch of money. These two Batman movies just did did really good money. They didn't do crazy money, but at least they made an impact.
Yeah.
All these films we're talking about made an impact, and it made it easy for Marvel to then go, okay, we have to hit it out of the park with Iron Man. And they did enough where then they could keep making more and more. And then Avengers hit. And around that time is when Disney bought them.
Yeah.
And it's been that way ever since, just pumping them out because it's gotten proved by people who are willing to push their idea. Because Sam Raimi he's that guy when it comes to, I describe him as more of an artist. And I think he wanted to make a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
And he got to make one. And he did a great job with it to the point where, okay, superhero films do work. It proves to the business that superhero films do work. So then as more artists prove that, Christopher Nolan, I would describe as an artist too. But I think he also does a good job of like getting a little bit closer to entertainer. But I think he stays mostly on artist side. And he's been able to build up such a massive fan base on the fact that he's an artist.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So basically, that's my point is I think the turns that happen are because of one artist proves that this type of thing works. And then you'll have artists go into that same thing and entertainers. And then I think eventually at some point it will switch to something else because things start getting stagnated.
Yeah. But
I think the pivot usually happens because an artist wanted to do something and they got their way somehow or got enough of their way to make a change happen.
But at the same time, that pivot, the entertainers, I feel like allow artists or just whatever to build on that and make it better than what was before.
I don't know what you just said.
So like I agree. There's a lot of like things that helped. Not even like the Spider-Man, or it was like the X-Men probably helped because that was a big franchise. The Batman helped. The Spider-Man helped. I feel like superheroes always been a thing, but when Marvel,
they've been more one-off kind of things, or like a quick trilogy, and then you don't see another superhero film for a while.
Yeah. So, but when Marvel, when a big IP that's focused on entertaining comes, it's like we're gonna try to entertain people. I feel like that is what made people be entertained by these real big superhero movies that are really good, in my opinion. And it's it's confusing because you can call them artists as well because they're able. It's so smart. Like the calculations, the calculated like mindset is they're able to make really good art as well, which is confusing to say because they're not really artists.
I guess my point, I guess when I'm using the label of entertainer or artist, the reason I say artist is because their focus in itself is the art itself. It's not necessarily like what is going to be the reactions or whatever. It's like, I want this art to be the way I want. It's more of a selfish thing, I feel like. I guess maybe is the way to put it.
And I get it. And
it's more being a selfish creative versus like creating for as many people as you can.
I get it. And I'm like arguing that maybe entertaining could be better for. I'm not saying I'm 100% agreeing with this, but maybe it could be because, like you said, selfish art sometimes it just don't hit.
But when it does,
a lot of times it just don't hit. But also entertaining hits, and when it does, it hits big as well, and it's really good. So it's like you said, but at the end of the day, it's a balance and need both for sure.
Yeah, that's my point. Is like you need both, and sometimes I think it gets too far one. Like,
yeah,
I don't think it's really ever gone too far the artist way because it's not.
Because you can't.
You're not going to make as much.
Exactly. You can't.
The business doesn't always.
It's not going to grow. It's not really going to grow like that. It's going to grow maybe artistically, maybe, but like, I know. But at the same time, you need that entertaining to make the money for it to help grow, and I feel like that's a really important part.
Yeah. So like, I think that when the business got the most to artists, like lean more towards artists, is 70s and 90s. In the 80s, it went really far back to the entertaining.
Yeah.
And then since 2000s, we've gone heavily into entertain with artists. Like, of course, you're still going to have your artist films come here and there. Because during the 80s, when people talk about it, it was the most corporate it had been, like after the 70s especially. You still had James Cameron making his shit.
Yeah.
But the 70s, because there was a transition from old Hollywood to new Hollywood, a bunch of the old executives were old. So then new executives came in, and those executives were honest of like, we don't really know what the fuck works. So these kids that were coming straight out of film school, they got to make different shit that wouldn't have gotten made before. And guess who all those people ended up being? Scorsese, Spielberg, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola. Basically, all these fucking legends we look at nowadays, they all came from that because the business was willing to let them make shit that wouldn't have gotten made before because they didn't know what was going to work.
See, man, this is such a...
But here's the thing. It could have gone really badly if they picked the wrong people.
I guess this is where my mind goes.
In the 90s, of course, you had like the big indie boom. So you had a lot of more people that could be described more as artists make it through because there was a big indie boom.
Yeah.
And I think indie typically tends to be more artistic.
Yeah.